perpetrators from Pakistani Muslim and other Muslim backgrounds formed the core of the rape gangs nationwide. They operated under an honor and shame clan code that treated non-Muslim girls, especially white working-class girls, as property available for sexual use because these girls had no male protectors who could retaliate. The men began by showering the girls with attention, gifts, alcohol, and drugs. This then escalated to coercion, gang rape, and trafficking. They transported victims across towns, shared them with friends and family, and sometimes forced conversions to Islam, followed by religious marriages. The Muslim men justified the abuse by describing white British girls as easy, trash, or morally inferior.
By the way, in this interesting, it's an entire culture of grooming, plying with alcohol, drugging, raping, gang raping, and pimping 11 and 12-year-old girls. And the men viewed themselves as morally superior to the girls that they're grooming.
Yep. The same network targeted Sikh girls until Sikh communities mobilized collective male protection and forced the gangs to withdraw. You see here.
By the way, do you remember that? That seemed like, I think that was about 10 years ago. It was a big thing with the Sikh community. What they would do is seduce a Sikh girl, but they would then get pictures. And the Sikh community is also like an honor shame culture. So they would say they would do anything they could to seduce a girl, then get pictures of her naked, and then say, now you're going to do whatever we say, or we're going to show these pictures to the family and post them all over the internet. So they would after that, that's how they got control of the Sikh girls. And then basically the girls had to do whatever these guys want. And so these guys are then raping them, gang raping them, pimping them, and so on. And it became such an issue that the Sikh community had to get together. The leaders had to get together and say, we basically need to change so that girls can come forward. If a girl ever messes up and goes and does something and a guy's blackmailing her, she needs to be able to come to her family and the Sikh community and say, this is what happened, because that's the only way that's going to stop. That's the only way to stop these guys from turning the girls into prostitutes. And so he said, we need to change it so that girls feel safer to come forward with this stuff.
So this is actually a good example of what Christians should be doing. And it's also, the context here is very important. Now, Sikh knives have recently become very, very controversial because of an incident of a Sikh guy killing a British young man with a knife, which was not the main reason why it caused a huge outcry. The main reason was that the perpetrator called the police and falsely reported that the British white guy was being racist, and the police then completely mistreated the situation and allowed the man to die, who is Henry Nowak, which happened a while ago, and the reports came out about it. So going back to the historical context of Sikhs, this is actually very, very, very much in line with the Sikh tradition, and for the reason why Sikhs have traditionally carried knives. The Sikh religion started out in an environment where they were basically blending together Islamic and Hindu beliefs, and the Sikhs started the whole tradition of carrying knives for their own protection and for the protection of other oppressed people. And they started that out in reaction to Muslims, to the Muslim empire, to the Mughal empire, and their oppression and forced conversion of minorities, including Sikhs and Hindus. So a core practice, the Sikh carrying of knives, started out in order to protect themselves in India from Muslims, from Muslim oppressors. And here, once again, you can see the Sikhs at least defending themselves against Muslim rape gangs, or defending their girls against Muslim rape gangs. British girls were not permitted such a defense. This religiously framed exploitation was repeated in every major town and city and beyond. The influence of Islam, Muslim treatment of non-Muslims worldwide. Britain is not a unique case. This sort of thing goes on anywhere that either welcomes mass migration from Muslim countries or contains long-established Muslim populations. There is a consistent pattern of sexual violence directed against non-Muslim minorities in settings where Muslims form the majority. Across Britain, as we have noted, girls from Sikh and Hindu backgrounds have also been targeted by Muslim gangs. Unlike the white British majority, these non-Muslim immigrant populations were never prevented from organizing as a collective to protect their own. In doing so, as was their duty, the network of Sikh organizations drew attention to the appalling treatment of non-Muslims in Pakistan. Quote, "We need only look at the appalling treatment of girls from minority faiths in Pakistan, where Christian, Hindu, and Sikh girls are kidnapped, forced to convert to Islam, and married to get an understanding of the underlying motivations. In 2018, around 1,000 girls in Pakistan's Sindh province alone suffered this fate. In many cases, perpetrators are granted impunity due to corruption and connivance with local officials."
And by the way, even if you were a good cop, for once, you can't do anything, because if you side with the Christians or the Hindus or the Sikhs, the Muslim community targets you as well. They'll burn your house to the ground too. So these guys the police just have to go along with these things.
In April 2024, UN human rights experts expressed serious alarm regarding the vulnerability of minority girls in Pakistan to forced religious conversions and forced marriages. Their press release highlighted that Christian and Hindu girls in particular face heightened risks of abduction, trafficking, child forced marriage, domestic servitude, and sexual violence. Human rights groups and media reports, including a 2021 BBC investigation, have estimated that thousands of non-Muslim girls, primarily Christians, Hindus, and Sikhs, are abducted annually in Pakistan, compelled to convert to Islam.
Notice that's not thousands, period. That's thousands annually.
Yeah. Compelled to convert to Islam and forced into marriage with their abductors. So in Pakistan, Christian, Hindu, and Sikh girls thousands of them are annually, every year, abducted, compelled to convert to Islam, and then forced into marriage with their abductors.
Yeah, so what that means is they get the girls and then they beat and torture them until they sign a thing saying, "Yep, I'm a Muslim now." And then when their family comes for them, they say, "Nope, here's a piece of paper that the girl signed saying she's a Muslim now, and therefore you're no longer part of her life. She's with us now." And then they show that to the police, and the police aren't going to do anything about it.
One documented case involved Farah, a 12-year-old Christian girl abducted from her home in June 2020 by 3 Muslim men, raped and forced to perform household labor as a slave. A common sequence in these cases sees a girl abducted, coerced into signing a conversion certificate.
I was right.
And swiftly married to a Muslim man. Police in Pakistan frequently side with the abductors over the girl's family.
Imagine that.
When parents pursue legal action, courts tend to uphold the legitimacy of the conversion. Birth certificates may be falsified to indicate that the girl is not a minor. Contact with her family is typically blocked. Following conversion to Islam, non-Muslim parents lose all authority over their child, as Islamic law prohibits non-Muslims from exercising guardianship over Muslims, including their own offspring.
By the way, that's not a uniquely Pakistani thing. That's been going on wherever Islam goes, and you have sizable populations of Christians, and that's why Copts in Egypt, so completely different part of the world, but that's why Copts in Egypt had to start tattooing their kids when they're young to identify their kids, because they would just a Muslim could just walk up to you, take your daughter, and then you call the police, and the Muslim says, "Nope, this always been my girl." And who are you going to listen to, the Muslim or the Christian? So they started putting the tattoos on for identification purposes.
This is also a thing, by the way, with leaving Islam in Pakistan and in many other Muslim countries. If those Muslim countries do not have an outright law where somebody who leaves Islam is put to death or imprisoned, they at least have a law where if you leave Islam and you have children, you will lose custody over your children. Because a non-Muslim shouldn't be having guardianship over Muslims, and you can't make your children leave Islam. That would be illegal. So if you leave Islam, you lose guardianship or custody over your kids. This is true in many, many dozens of Muslim countries. It's a really messed up thing. The evidence from grooming gang convictions across Britain repeatedly shows a Muslim background among many of the perpetrators. When this is viewed alongside similar patterns of sex crimes observed both in countries of origin for immigrants and in Muslim majority societies, it offers compelling grounds to consider that elements of Islam are contributing to the grooming gang scourge in our country. While it is unsurprising that a religion can shape and regulate sexual behavior, the suggestion that Islam might play a role in driving sex crimes remains deeply uncomfortable for some in the liberal West. Even so, the possibility of an Islamic influence on these crimes cannot be dismissed. The available data strongly points toward it as a hypothesis that merits serious examination.
By the way, I mean, shouldn't that last sentence there be like common sense? I mean, not just after this, after years of Islamic terrorist attacks and people shouting Allahu Akbar, slaughtering unbelievers in the name of Allah, sometimes leaving manifestos, leaving videos, sometimes stopping for interviews with the camera as they're waiting for police after they killed somebody, and they're quoting the Quran, they're quoting the Hadith, they're justifying all this. Wouldn't it be like, shouldn't it be obvious to say, hey, maybe we need to look into the texts, the sources of Islam, to see if there is in fact a connection? That's the one thing you are never allowed to do. And if you did do it, you were just a racist, Islamophobic, hate-mongering bigot. But it was the same with the grooming gangs. It was just off limits. No, whatever else happens, you're not going to look into Islam's sources to see if there's any connection. That's the one thing you're not allowed to do.
The impact of any religion on individual behavior is rarely direct and unmediated. It is heavily filtered through culture, which a religion can gradually reshape over generations. Not all Muslim communities or societies are influenced by Islam to the same degree or in the same manner. Minority Muslim populations may behave differently from majority ones. For instance, convictions of Indian origin Muslim men in grooming gang cases across Britain are notably rare compared with those of Pakistani heritage. This disparity may relate to a demographic context. Muslims form only about 14% of India's population, with Hindus comprising around 80%, placing them in a minority position where social and legal constraints differ markedly from Pakistan, where Muslims dominate overwhelmingly and non-Muslims constitute a small, often marginalized minority. In such a setting, exploiting non-Muslim neighbors becomes far easier. This is very important. At least 8 theological aspects of Islam may contribute to cultural patterns that enable or normalize the sexual abuse of non-Muslim girls. These include 1. The doctrine of Muslim superiority. 2. The principle of loyalty and disavowal, al-wala wal-bara. 3. Male dominance over women. 4. Enforced seclusion and veiling of women. 5. Forced marriage combined with the absence of a fixed minimum age of consent. 6. The perception of female sexuality as inherently dangerous or fitna, corruption. 7. The historical Sharia institution of slavery. And 8. The system of dhimmitude. These are all rooted in classical Islamic theology, up to and including Islamic jurisprudence. But even in Sharia-governed nations, adaptations are common, such as setting a minimum marriage age or restricting unilateral divorce by men in order to lessen the harsher effects on women. Does this now go through each of them by one? Yes, it does.
Yep. You need to check all those passages, man. Look, Surah 3, verse 110. Muslims are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind. Where have we heard that before? Over and over and over again.
Muslim supremacism. Islam holds that those who are righteous and truly fear God, meaning Muslims, are inherently superior to those who reject Allah's commands, namely non-Muslims. This idea is captured in Quran 3, verse 110. You, Muslims, are the best nation raised up for humankind, commanding what is good and forbidding what is wrong, and believing in Allah. If only the people of the book, the Christians and Jews, believed, it would be better for them. Some among them are believers, but most are perverted. Chapter 3, verse 110. So according to the Quran verse here, which they accurately cited, the majority of Christians and Jews are perverted people, and are not good and are not righteous. That's it. And you know what you do with perverted people. The verse positions Muslims as the finest community entrusted by God with the duty to enjoin good and prohibit evil. This responsibility can be understood as authorizing Muslims to correct, compel, or if needed, punish non-Muslims, potentially through coercion or force. Other Quranic passages affirm Islam's ultimate supremacy over all religions, as in Surah 48, verse 28. It is He, Allah, who has sent His messenger with the guidance and the religion of truth to make it triumph over every religion. Non-Muslims who refuse Islam are described in harsh terms, such as in Surah 8, verse 55. Surely the worst of animals in Allah's sight are the rejectors of Islam. They do not believe. They didn't include the best example here. Do they include it later on? Surah 98, verse 6.
Should have had 98.6 in there.
It should have been in here. Let's have a look at it. Quran 98, verse 6. What does this beautiful verse say?
Jews and Christians and al-mushrikun are the worst of creatures.
Quran chapter 98, verse 6 says the following. Indeed, they who disbelieve among the people of the scripture, meaning Christians and Jews, and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. Those are the worst of creatures. Verily, those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, the Quran, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, from among the people of the scripture, Jews and Christians and al-mushrikun will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures. So this is what the Quran says. However, this is probably some Islamophobic propaganda. Don't believe it. The concept of Muslim superiority is closely linked to derogatory views of non-Muslims. For instance, Surah 9 verse 28 labels associators, a pejorative term encompassing Christians, Jews, and other non-Muslims, as unclean, najis.
Yep, it's like filthy.
Yeah. These teachings can provide a religious justification that bolsters an abuser's conviction of their own superiority and facilitates the dehumanization of non-Muslim victims. In her July 2020 podcast interview, Rotherham survivor Dr. Ella Hill described abusive language and acts that embodied this sense of superiority. She recounted being made to bend down and kiss her perpetrator's feet as a deliberate act to underscore her inferiority. She also spoke of another Rotherham victim who, during gang rapes by dozens of men, was forced to lick their feet clean because they believed they were morally superior to her. Hill observed, it's a Muslim superiority thing. They believe they have maximum moral authority to command the people beneath them to lick their feet. She further noted that her rapists viewed non-Muslim habits as inherently impure. Quote, if you're eating pork, you are unclean, you're dirty. If you use a knife and fork, you're dirty. If you don't eat your food with your hands. You know, I have something to add here. I grew up in Germany among lots of Muslim immigrants. It is a very, very well-known thing, even as a gag, as a joke, or as a mockery among Muslim populations. It's very, very well known that men generally have this attitude there, that they will have sexual relationships as Muslims with the local non-Muslim white girls and women, but that they will eventually not marry any of them, but they will eventually, when their family pressures them to get married, find a pure virgin Muslim woman from back home and then marry her. And this is the general thing, where they will live their lives and basically have sex with, by consent or by force, with as many of the local white women as possible, just to then end up breaking up with them or dumping them, and then finding a pure virgin Muslim woman from their home country and then getting married and acting all holy and pure and wonderful. Of course, this behavior is only reserved for the men, not for the women. The women would be killed if they did something like that. Us and them mindset. It is the Islamic principle known as al-wala wal-bara, loyalty and disavowal, commands Muslims to direct their love and allegiance toward what pleases God, what pleases Allah, while hating, avoiding, and distancing themselves from what displeases Him. I would really like to see, it would have been really much better had they put Allah in every instance in such context instead of
Would have been better.
because it is not God. Even when they quote the Quran, it's not God, it is Allah. When they say Allahu Akbar, it's not God is great, it is Allah is the greatest, or Allah is greater. It is Allah, it's not God. And even that aside, so both objectively, right? Allah and God are not really the same thing. It's a different thing. Allah is the proper name of the Islamic God in Islam. And aside from that, from a Christian perspective, I think we should also not be doing any of the mixing up here and describing what Muslims believe in as God, capital G, God. It is Allah. It is a different thing, a poor attempt to imitate what Christians and Jews believed in at the time. From Muhammad's perspective, he tried to imitate the God of the Jews and the Christians, and he came up with Allah. That Allah is not capital G God. It's the pagan Islamic God. And yes, I'm aware that some Christians in the Muslim world, or in Arabic-speaking countries, may also colloquially refer to God as Allah, but that is just a habit. That is just a cultural thing. Allah in Islam is the proper name of the Islamic God, who is a joke, the God of the rapists. In essence, it calls for loving and supporting fellow believers and rejecting non-believers. Accurate. This teaching draws on several Quranic verses, including, "Let not the believers take the disbelievers as allies, rather than of believers. Whoever does that has nothing from God, unless you guard yourselves as a precaution. You who believe, do not take the Jews and the Christians as allies. They are allies of each other. Whoever of you takes them as allies is already one of them. Surely Allah does not guide the people who are evildoers. Yet you see those in whose hearts is a sickness. They are quick to turn to them. Whoever takes Allah as an ally and his messenger and those who believe, surely the party of Allah, they are the victors." So in short, do not befriend the Jews and the Christians. Christians and Jews are friends of each other, and whoever of you befriends the Jews or the Christians, he is one of them, and Allah hates them. Surah 5, verse 51 to 52 and 56. There was a good example for you in Abraham and those who were with him when they said to their people, "Surely we are quit of you and what you serve instead of Allah. We repudiate you, and between us and you enmity has appeared and hatred forever until you believe in Allah alone." Chapter 60, verse 4. This is where the Quran puts words in Abraham's mouth and depicts him as somebody who started this whole policy of we will always hate you, disbelievers, until you believe in Allah.
And that was important because Surah 60, verse 8, that is one of the most common verses Muslims go to argue that Islam is a religion of peace. It says Allah doesn't forbid you from showing kindness, and is talking about like one of your family members who's not a Muslim yet, and so on. Of course, if you look at a commentary like Tafsir Jalalain, he says this was abrogated by commands to fight and subjugate them. But one of the easy things to do is just point out, hey, wait a minute, just 4 verses earlier, it gives the example of Abraham, who, by the way, never did this. This is the Islamic Abraham, who is a jihadi. The Islamic Abraham says, hey, until you convert to Islam, there is enmity and hatred between us forever, forever. And the Quran says you have a good example for you in Abraham. What's a good example of Abraham? Endless hostility between you and non-Muslims.
Indeed. I'm sorry, I just find British insults sometimes very funny. So.
Yeah, they are. It's weird that we don't have that. They have all these weird insults that we don't have.
These passages emphasize that Muslims should maintain strong bonds within the Muslim community while keeping non-Muslims at a distance and harboring enmity toward them. The Quran warns that Allah views non-Muslims with contempt, and that Muslims who befriend, ally with, or associate closely with them risk being regarded by Allah as disbelievers themselves. While some Muslims downplay this doctrine, revivalist movements which have gained considerable influence in Western countries have actively promoted it, presenting strict adherence to loyalty and disavowal as vital for the Muslim community's success in carrying out its divine mission. And it would be very, very useful here to point out who are the perpetrators of this, the influence that these traditionalists and revivalists have earned in the West. The perpetrators, those who have funded these activities, those who have led to the influence and the revival of the revivalists, of the Salafis and others, are Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and other countries. Those that outright now, or outwardly now, act like, oh no, we have nothing to do with the extremists, and we have no idea why the extremists are growing in the West, and you shouldn't even be allowing this. Yeah, we funded all of this. We funded all the stuff in the universities and the mosques and the streets. But hey, we are not sure why you have all these extremists in your Western streets. We don't have that stuff over here. These oil-rich bastard countries were the ones who caused the activities of Salafis and others in the West to begin with. And they also helped the spread of Islamist groups and of rape gangs and of terrorism and so on. Qatar is the #1 perpetrator of that, but Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have also done that. Beyond its theological role, al-Wala wal-Bara has profoundly shaped certain Islamic cultures. In such environments, many Muslims feel strong pressure not to say or do anything that could damage the image of the Muslim community or bring discredit to Islam. Within an honor and shame-based framework reinforced by these values, speaking out to outsiders about wrongdoings committed by fellow Muslims is often seen as an act of betrayal. This is very, very important. Similar patterns have appeared in accounts from grooming gang survivors. Some have described approaching the police only to be interviewed by Muslim officers who switched off the recording device and urged her to abandon her complaint due to supposed lack of evidence.
Yeah, can you imagine this? You're talking like, so you got like an 11-year-old girl, 12-year-old girl comes in there, I've been gang raped, and sitting down with a police officer. But the Muslim police officer says, oh, sorry, dear, nothing you're saying counts as evidence. None of this is good enough.
Sister, I will talk to you. I will talk to these people that you're complaining about, and well, I will get to the truth. Don't worry, sister.
Yeah. And you go talk to the guys. Hey, get this girl under control. She's trying to report you guys. So make sure she understands never to do that again. Don't worry. I told her that there's nothing police can do. So she's completely helpless, and you can spend the next 10 years raping her and all her friends.
I mean, I'll be very honest. If I am in the UK, I would be very, very very worried to go to the police and talk to a Muslim police officer about any problems that I experience. A deeply ingrained culture of enforced loyalty and community protection can discourage individuals from reporting abuses or providing evidence against members of their own group. Had the social worker in Hanan's case reported her disclosures to the police, leading to her father facing criminal charges, he would have exposed himself, and by extension those associated with him, to the serious risk of being labeled a traitor within the community. A traitor within the community. The prominent.
By the way, can you imagine this? Like, that's how it is in Pakistan, right? Hey, I can't side with a Christian or a Hindu against my own people, because then I'm going to be at best an outcast among my own people. That's how it is in Pakistan. And that's why police can't do anything about this. But then you import tons and tons and tons of these people who have the exact same mentality, and you make them police officers in the UK, in areas where you have the rape gangs and so on. And they have the exact same mentality. How am I going to side with a non-Muslim girl over the Muslim community? Can't do it. Be an outcast and a traitor among my own people. And so, even if you're not partaking, and by the way, we know from the reports, some of the girls said there was basically cop day, where it's understood, okay, this is the day when the cops come in and rape you. So some cops are actually in on it. They're actually doing it, but the ones who aren't, the Pakistani men, they're not reporting on their own people.
The prominent Indian Pakistani Muslim thinker and revivalist Abu Ala Maududi, in his influential work Let Us Be Muslims, maintained that Muslims cannot achieve true success until their highest allegiance is given to Allah and to the Muslim Ummah. The doctrine of loyalty and disavowal exerts particularly strong pressure when Muslims live as a minority in non-Muslim host societies. In such settings, as they seek to preserve and assert a powerful collective identity, Muslims may place even greater emphasis on internal solidarity and separation from non-believers than they would in their countries of origin. That is very, very correct. That is exactly my observation. I can confirm. Superiority and dominance of men over women. Islam establishes that men hold the position of managers or maintainers, or also known as over women. As stated in Surah 4, verse 34, where the role involves ensuring women remain in their proper state. Under Islamic law, every woman remains under the guardianship of a male relative. Normally, this is her father. Should the father be unable to serve due to death, loss of mental capacity, or apostasy from Islam, as I just explained earlier, a specified order of male relatives from the paternal line steps in, starting with the paternal grandfather, then sons, brothers, nephews, and uncles. Surah 4:34 further authorizes men to discipline their wives, including through physical violence. Numerous authoritative sources in Sharia regulations reinforce the notion of women's inferiority to men. Surah 2, verse 228 declares that men hold a rank above women. The Prophet Muhammad stated that women are deficient in both religion and intelligence relative to men.
Say that.
And in the same hadith, he noted that women form the majority of those in hell.
That's true.
He also taught that if a woman or a dog passes in front of a praying man, the prayer is invalidated. A reason mosques position men with their backs to women during prayers. Sharia obliges a wife to engage in sexual intercourse with her husband whenever he desires it. If she refuses, Muhammad said the angels will curse her until morning. I'm actually very surprised by this. Even if you have a quite well anti-Islamic informed source talking about things like these, you rarely see this much accurate detail stated in a report.
Yeah, they're working with some people here, or they did a ton of research, but most likely they contacted some very knowledgeable people and said, take us through all this stuff and make sure we're getting all this right about what's in their sources.
Yeah. I'm very, very happy to see this awareness here. People need to know this everywhere. Divorce under Sharia strongly favors men. A husband may unilaterally divorce his wife without stating a reason, simply by pronouncing "I divorce you" 3 times. For a wife, obtaining a divorce is far more difficult, typically involving a formal legal process and often a financial cost. Following divorce, the mother may retain physical custody of young children up to a particular age, but the father retains legal guardianship. Moreover, if the mother remarries, she loses the right to have children from her previous marriage reside with her. Sharia rules on evidence further diminish women's status, valuing a woman's testimony at half that of a man's. Inheritance laws under Sharia generally allocate women half the share given to men. For example, a son receives twice the portion of a daughter. A wife or wives together inherit 1/4 of a husband's estate if he leaves no children, or 1/8 if he does leave children. In contrast, a husband inherits half of his wife's estate if she has no children, or 1/4 if she does. Sharia's approach to rape also disadvantages women. Rape is categorized as a form of zina, illicit sexual intercourse, the same offense that covers adultery and fornication. Zina is defined as a sexual intercourse between a man and a woman who is neither his wife nor his slave. There is no distinct offense of rape. It is treated as coerced zina, and marital rape is not recognized. The penalty for the rapists mirrors that for consensual extramarital sex: 100 lashes for an unmarried person, or stoning to death for one who is or has been married. When a woman accuses a man of rape, her consent is presumed unless both the act of penetration and her lack of consent are proven by 4 male eyewitnesses who each directly observed the man's penis entering the woman's vagina. Naturally, the presence of 4 men witnessing a rape without intervening makes it highly improbable they would testify in the victim's favor. Should a woman allege rape but fail to produce the 4 required male witnesses, she risks being convicted of zina on the basis of her own accusation.
Yep, that's why so many women in Pakistan, vast majority of women in prison in Pakistan are there for being raped. And they either reported the rape, but we can't prove it. We can't prove it. We don't have 4 witnesses, or the male witnesses who were gathered around gang raping me, shockingly, wouldn't report what happened. Or they get raped and they become pregnant. So in other words, they don't want to report it. They don't want to report it because they know they won't be believed and they can't prove it Islamically. So here's the situation, guys. Woman gets raped. If she decides to go to police, she walks into police, says, I've been raped. They said, okay, who are all your witnesses? She says, no, it's just my word versus his. And he says, what? No, I didn't. Never happened. And then they say, okay, well, you can't prove this against him, but you just admitted that you had sex. So now you're going to prison for a long, long time. So either that happens, but lots of women know that's going to happen. So they don't even bother going to police, but some of them get raped and then become pregnant. And then it's, hey, what happened there? Oh, I was raped. Well, sorry, you can't prove that, but we know you had sex because you're pregnant. Therefore, and they send them to prison. And this is this. And somehow Western leaders were like, hey, we've got a bunch of people who think like that. You know, it'd be great. Let's bring in as many of these people as possible who think like this and put them around a bunch of 11 and 12-year-old white British girls.
That is correct. And it almost looks like this report was written by David, because in the very next sentence here it says, in 2003, Pakistan's National Commission on the Status of Women reported that up to 88% of women imprisoned in Pakistan were rape or gang rape victims who, unable to meet the 4 witness requirement, were instead convicted of illicit sex.
Mm-hmm.
Let's read that again.
Mm-hmm.
In 2003, Pakistan's National Commission on the Status of Women reported that up to 88% of women imprisoned in Pakistan were rape or gang rape victims who, unable to meet the 4 witness requirement, were instead convicted of illicit sex. Taken together, these Sharia provisions that institutionalize male dominance over women exert a profound influence. In cultures shaped by Islam, boys can be raised to grow into men who assume rightful control over the women in their lives, confident in their inherent superiority. That is absolutely correct. Yurik Petter says, trend among scared young Muslims prefer leaving UK. Nice. I agree with them. The seclusion of women. Islamic law contains multiple provisions that mandate the covering and seclusion of women. It is widely recognized that a Muslim woman must cover most of her body when appearing in public. Additionally, Sharia grants a male guardian the authority to restrict a girl's or a woman's movements, allowing him to confine a wife or daughter to the home and permit her to leave only when accompanied by a male relative and for a valid reason. This is reflected in Surah 33, verse 33, which instructs women, stay in your houses and do not flaunt yourselves. One consequence of the Sharia-derived culture of covering and seclusion is that a woman who appears in public without covering or remains outside the protected space of the home may be culturally perceived as unguarded and therefore sexually available or promiscuous. This is very, very correct. And the early Muslim commentators also, by the way, point that out as a fact, that that the hijab is instituted so to separate the pious and good Muslim women from disbelievers, prostitutes, and slaves. That is basically the perspective of the hijab, traditionally, to begin with. Muslim women are supposed to be covered up and stay at home. Those who needlessly go outside and show themselves are basically seen as prostitutes, disbelievers, and slaves who are just asking to be raped. That's the Islamic perspective. This notion that an uncovered woman invites molestation is suggested in Surah 33, verse 59 of the Quran, where Muhammad is instructed that his wives and daughters should cover themselves so that they are not abused.
Yusuf the Yusuf Ali translation says so that they are not molested.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so two crazy things about that. So one, what they're pointing out here, it's, hey, you have to dress like a frumpy ninja if you don't want to be molested. It's okay, well, if I don't dress like that, then what? Then you're basically asking to be molested and abused by men. And so you're asking for it. So that's one creepy part. The other creepy part is even women who dress like that get molested all the time in Muslim countries. Even during the Hajj, walking around the Kaaba.
This was a case back in a few years ago where Muslim women who went to the pilgrimage in Mecca were reporting that they are harassed and sexually molested and groped in Mecca around the Kaaba all the time, and they were silenced for that. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I mean, think about how crazy that is, right? So it started after the Me Too movement, and then they started Mosque Me Too when they started talking about, but most of the stories ended up being about going on the Hajj, and then guys, like she said, I'm walking the circles around the Kaaba, and I got guys feeling me and groping me all over the place, just constantly. There's nothing you could do about it while you're there. They report this, and then 3 or 4 days later, you'd see their post is gone. Yeah. And they're basically pressured by their fellow Muslims. No, you're making Islam look bad. No, stop this. And so they silence the victims, as they always do. And it's very difficult to find any of those anymore. There were tons of them. I actually have a ton of them because I was taking screenshots. Once I noticed, once you post one, 3 days later it's gone, I started screenshotting them. So I actually have on one of my old drives, I have a ton of those. It is very difficult to find anyone who left them up because they'd be constantly harassed by Muslims to take it down, and they would eventually take it down. But I mean, think about that. They're sexually assaulted on the Hajj, walking around the Kaaba, and then when they try to say something about it, they're silenced. And it's like, this is how they're treating Muslim women at their holiest site. What do you think they're going to do with some non-Muslim women?
Indeed. Certain Islamic preachers have explicitly endorsed this view. Following the high-profile convictions of Muslim men of Lebanese background for rape in Sydney, Australia, the country's Grand Mufti Sheikh Taj al-Din al-Hilali controversially placed blame on the victims for not being covered and not remaining in their homes. He stated, if you take out uncovered meat and place it outside without cover, and the cats come to eat it, whose fault is it, the cats or the uncovered meats? Because the women are, if they go outside uncovered, they are uncovered meat. The uncovered meat is the problem. If she was in her room, in her home, in her hijab, no problem would have occurred. In making these remarks, Sheikh al-Hilali was presenting Islamic norms as the remedy to crimes of the kind committed by rape gangs. According to this perspective, if individuals adopted Islam and adhered to its rules, women and girls would be protected from such abuses because they would be kept secluded, placed under permanent male supervision, and rendered invisible to outsiders. Let me just read a little bit more. Forced marriage and the age of consent. Under Sharia, marriage takes the form of a contract arranged between two men, the groom and the bride's male guardian, her wali. The structure closely resembles a contract of sale. The groom pays an agreed sum, known as the mahr, to the bride, and in exchange she becomes sexually available to him. Islamic jurisprudence sets no minimum age at which a girl or a woman may be married. Religious authorities permit a father to arrange a marriage for his daughter, even while she is still an infant. Correct. The Prophet Muhammad himself married Aisha when she was 6, an arrangement made between Muhammad and her father, and consummated the marriage when she was 9. The Quran itself addresses the remarriage of a divorced girl who has not reached menstruation, Surah 6, verse 50, Surah 65, verse 4. These guys know, man.
It does say that.
Sharia distinguishes between types of guardians. The bride's father or paternal grandfather is termed a wali, mujbir, forcing guardian, because certain schools of Islamic law allow him to compel a virgin daughter or granddaughter into marriage without her consent. The notion that a girl must reach a particular age before she can consent to sexual activity is foreign to Islam. In Islamic teaching, the only lawful context for a woman to consent to sex is through marriage, and even that consent is not always required. Significantly, the Arabic term nikah denotes both marriage and sexual intercourse. Sharia, in effect, merges the two concepts. An unmarried woman is forbidden from engaging in sex, while a married woman has no right under Sharia to refuse sexual relations with her husband. This is very, very correct. Hadith further states that a virgin's silence constitutes consent to marriage. This merging of consent to marriage and consent to sex sheds light on Dr. Hill's account that her rapists interpreted their victim's silence as consent to the rape, drawing on these same hadiths. Islamic scholars differ on the degree of physical or emotional maturity needed for sexual intercourse. Some hold that the onset of puberty serves as the threshold for readiness, though Muhammad consummated his marriage with the 9-year-old Aisha before she reached puberty, and others permit thighing, intercrural sex with a wife who is menstruating or considered too young for vaginal penetration. This practice Dr. Hill also described. These observations suggest that Muslim grooming gangs may exhibit religious and cultural indifference to the modern concept of an age of consent. In an interview, Andrew Norfolk, one of the first journalists to expose Britain's rape gang scandal, stated that although Islam prohibits sex outside marriage, all 4 schools of Islamic jurisprudence teach that a girl can be married when she reaches puberty, which on average in Britain is 11. When the Muslim Brotherhood government took power in Egypt, one of the new laws that they were going to introduce was to lower the age of consent from 18 to 13. This is true. And disappointment was voiced by certain Salafis and Muslim Brotherhood scholars that it wasn't 9. Gosh. Religion of rape. Religion of pedophilia. And religion of rape. This all sounds a little bit Islamophobic, so let's just hear it once from this guy here.
When there are signs of physical maturity, it becomes permissible for the husband in Islamic law to have marital relationships or consummate the relation with his bride. And this is the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Do you know what precocious puberty is?
Starting puberty unusually early.
Is there anything in Islam to prevent you from, a man marrying a 5-year-old that started precocious puberty?
You can arrange a marriage even as an infant, but that doesn't mean that sex is allowed.
Could a man have a marriage to a 5-year-old consummated if she started precocious puberty?
If she starts showing signs of physical maturity, then yes, that's permissible. As I
What
said,
about age 4?
If there are signs
3.
So this is something that becomes biologically impossible because
I have a
puberty,
study
there are
that shows
no.
it goes as early as 11 months.
Well, that's something that the parents would not. See, the thing about Islamic marriage is that parents are involved at these ages. And when you look at the marriage of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when there are signs of physical.
There you go. Allahu Akbar. Islamic State had 9 as the permissible age of a marriage. I don't think there is the same sense of wrongness and shame in some cases about having sex with a 12-year-old girl. Next topic, female sexuality. Islamic canonical sources portray women as possessing sexual desires that are at least as strong as men's, if not stronger, and view these desires as potentially harmful to men. The Prophet Muhammad stated, "After me, I have not left any trial more severe to men than women." The Arabic term fitna used here denotes a severe trial that can involve seduction or temptation, leading people astray from faith. And it also carries connotations of chaos that disrupts societal harmony. Muhammad further suggested that men are susceptible to sexual temptation, explaining that Allah has preordained a portion of zina, unlawful sexual intercourse, for every man. Allah has written for the son of Adam his inevitable share of zina, whether he is aware of it or not. One practical expression of anxiety over women's sexuality is the practice of female genital mutilation, which various schools of Islamic law either require either require or strongly recommend as a way to curb excessive female sexual desire. So this is the practice of female genital mutilation, where they cut young girls, in order to make the girls, when they grow up, less sexually active, or prevent them from ever having pleasure.
Hey, by the way, this makes sense because Ayaan Hirsi Ali was one of the people they interviewed.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And she's one of the people probably more than anyone who informed people about this that I can think of.
Because it was done to her. One practical expression of anxiety over women's sexuality is the practice of female genital mutilation, which various schools of Islamic law either require or strongly recommend as a way to curb excessive female sexual desire. Another reflection of the perceived danger posed by female sexuality is the strict separation of the sexes enforced through practices such as veiling women's bodies, restricting them to the home, and the Quranic directive against men and women gazing at one another. Tell the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their private parts, that is purer for them. Surely Allah is aware of what they do. And say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their private parts and not show their charms. Surah 24, verse 30, 31. Dr. Hill described being subjected.
Muhammad was like, no, don't lower your gaze. Bring your gaze to me in the desert.
Bring a gaze out there. I can spend the night with the gaze. 30 of them. Dr. Hill described being subjected to this rule in practice. I was told to look at the floor whenever I was around Muslim men. She was informed that if a woman looks at a man, that means she wants to have sex with him. Yep. Although female sexuality is seen as a source of fitna, Sharia assigns, so this is actually a very good advice for all the women out there. You should know that if you walk around and you walk by a crowd of Muslim men, especially if you're alone, it's probably good to look away. Although female sexuality is seen as a source of fitna, Sharia assigns men regarded as more rational and better able to exercise self-restraint, the Allah-given responsibility to oversee and regulate women. From this perspective, a woman who fails to comply with Sharia norms, for instance by appearing unveiled and unaccompanied in public, represents a danger to social order. In such a framework, responsibility for any sexual assault she suffers is often attributed to her own behavior, especially when combined with notions of the inherent impurity of non-Muslims.
I asked, what percentage of women in Somalia are victims of female genital mutilation? Female genital mutilation is nearly universal in Somalia, with prevalence rates reaching 99% among women and girls aged 15 to 49. 99%.
Which is very, very messed up. We talk about this like it's a distant thing, right? When you encounter people from certain cultures like Somalia, especially if they lived there, they will tell you that they were subjected to this. This outlook leads to non-Muslim women who appear uncovered and move freely without male supervision being labeled as sluts, who are eager to entice men. In this cultural context, a Muslim man who engages in sexual activity with such a woman bears no blame. The fault lies entirely with the woman. Islamic teachings concerning the perilous nature of female sexuality and the moral inferiority of non-Muslims can reinforce and legitimize this pattern of attributing responsibility to the victim.